when you have teams in California and teams in, on the East Coast in the very same conference, that tells you this was professional sports all along, with a side of history and psychology and economics and whatever major you choose. From the beginning with football and with basketball, it has always been about the football and basketball. And it's why I'm so amazed that amateurism held up for as long as it did, because it was always such a false conceit.
The Field Talk podcast is brought to you by Rhoback. And if you haven't yet tried Rhoback, well, allow me to be the person to convince you, because I seriously live in this stuff. Once again, I am rocking the hoodie today. It's supposed to be warm over the next few days. That means I will be in either a Rhoback tee or a polo, probably wearing some of the shorts. And when fall rolls back around, I tell you, it's not just football season, it's Rhoback jogger season. Best fit, best feel. Head to rhoback.com, and to get 20% off of your first order, use the promo code FIELD. They say that baseball is America's pastime. As far as I'm concerned, that's true, but also following the baseball coverage of Jeff Passan is America's pastime. Passan is everywhere. If you follow baseball on ESPN, he's one of the preeminent newsbreakers in the entire industry, regardless of sport. He's all over TV as well. He makes appearances in pretty much every medium that you could imagine. But it's not just what he does on the camera that stands out. It's also his wit and humor that shines through for his very, very popular audience on Twitter, where Jeff is amongst the most popular people on that entire platform. Jeff is a fun guy to be around, and really looking forward to catching up with him here on today's Field Talk podcast. So without further ado, here is ESPN's baseball insider, Jeff Passan. There are a lot of places that we could start, but I felt like there was only one natural place to start, Jeff. What is it like to break Twitter?
There's a really odd and interesting power that comes in that. But the counterbalance of the power, and I'm so sorry to go Peter Parker here, is the responsibility. And it's, as much as anything, I think it is what keeps me honest in this job. That I understand, on one hand, with a tap of a button, I have the ability to go and hit the dopamine receptors of millions of people, like quite literally millions of people at a time, and either make their day or make it a lot worse, because we care about sports like we care about religion, and like we care about politics, and like we care about all of the most important things in our life. It's in that S tier of modern human consumption. But at the same time, I understand that if I'm wrong, what have I done? What have I done to everybody out there who relies on me to be right? And so it's why, even if I am 99.9 repeating percent sure that something I have, some nugget of information, is correct, I will not put it on social media. It has to be 100. It has to be 100. It has to be. I don't have the luxury to guess that extra 0.0001%. And so it's, it's a really cool thing knowing that my work has the ability to not just reach so many people, but have some sort of odd impact on their lives. But at the same time, that's where the pressure comes from, man. That's why you need to be right, and why I think that myself and Adam and Adrian and other people who try and break news for a living have the reputations that we do because we don't get stuff wrong.
What you are today is one of the most respected journalists in all of sports who does have that power, the aforementioned power you just spoke about, to influence the days of millions of people with just one tweet. You're a very judicious tweeter. You have reached this point in your career where you don't have to sit on the internet all day and just sort of give your thoughts on anything from the weather to the happenings of baseball to whatever takes place in between. But at some point, there was a beginning for you, Jeff Passan, the journalist. Are you one of those people like me who got into this side of the industry, meaning covering it as opposed to playing it because you realized you weren't athletic enough to play in MLB? Or were you somebody that from a young age felt like maybe this is the path that I would pursue?
It's in my blood. My dad worked at the Plain Dealer in Cleveland for 40 plus years in the sports department, covered everything. And while he was, when I was growing up, he was more on the inside as an editor and on the desk. He hosted sports talk radio on the weekends. And it's almost like, I hate to say it, sports talk radio is like crack cocaine. It's just like the worst and most addictive like version of what we do, and it brings out the absolute worst. Sports talk radio is like what the internet was before the internet existed. It was where all because there was an element of anonymity to it, right? You called up and you could say, hey, this is Jeff from Solon, or you could call up and say, this is Field from Solon, or Will, or Pete, or Daffy, or whoever. Like, you can make up any name. You could take on any persona that you wanted. So I would go into the studio with my dad, and I saw that side of things, and I saw that he was getting paid to talk about sports. What? This is a thing? Like,
Beats working, right?
I can actually do this for a living. So certainly there was an element of 5'9" to it, which is my height, and thus it is going to dictate a future that in all likelihood does not involve me playing sports. And you, I mean, at least you were able to go on and play it at the college level, right? Like, you
Yeah.
got those extra 4 years.
Inglorious.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, it is glorious though. Like, you got those extra 4 years that the vast majority of us do not get. And it's very interesting. My 16-year-old plays baseball and is good enough that he probably, if like stays healthy, he will probably get to play in college. And so, seeing that he has these extra 4 years and looking through it through the lens of being a parent, and knowing how exciting it is for me to have all of the feelings that come with watching your child play sports. There's the pride, and there's the nerves, and there's the excitement, and there's the nausea, and like this grand cocktail of things. Some good, some not so good, but it's feelings. It just brings it out in you, and knowing that life potentially can be extended for a few more years. I'm jealous that I did not get that, but yeah, why work a real job if you can do this?
Yeah, I say it often. I agree with it. And just as an aside, I find that generally when the sports following, the fans who listen to or read or watch sports media daily, go back and check the college stats, usually doesn't work out so well for the sports media types. So if you're out there right now, don't bother checking the stats. There's really hardly any of them to actually find. The industry that you are now in, the world of news breaking, is also about relationship management, Jeff. But you mentioned growing up in the city of Cleveland, a city who has an incredible passion for sports, one of the greatest cities in terms of fans that at least I believe there is in this entire country. But there also were some hard times, a lot of hard times for the city of Cleveland. There has been this, I don't know about love hate, but this love torture relationship with the Browns, the team, of course, in the sport that I cover. But the reason why I bring those two dynamics up is, did growing up in the city of Cleveland maybe affords you the capacity to call it like you see it more, as opposed to having to always try to find the sunny side up view of sports? And meanwhile, when you're dealing in a relationship management business with executives and agents and players, is that sort of a dichotomy in what you're dealing with, from the brutally honest truth to the need to keep somebody happy, to maintain that relationship that is sort of inextricably tied to your vitality in your reporter role?
Growing up in Cleveland taught me that life sucks. And I don't mean that Cleveland itself sucks. I mean that Cleveland sports, it was like your balls were a speed bag, and it would just like constantly punch. I mean, seriously, that's what it felt like being a Cleveland sports fan growing up in the 1980s and 1990s. From the drive to the shot to the fact that the 1990s Indians teams, to me, are like the best baseball, the best era of a baseball team ever to not win a championship, the
Yeah, they're the
most
early 90s
talented.
Bills, right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, and I understand the Bills had Jim Kelly and Thurman Thomas and Andre Reed, and the defense was really good too. Well, the 90s Indians lineup was Kenny Lofton, who's a borderline Hall of Famer, Carlos Baerga, who was a multi-time All-Star, Albert Bell, who's one of the best hitters of his generation, Jim Thome, Manny Ramirez hit fifth, Eddie Murray, future Hall of Famer, was in there. Sandy Alomar was multi-time All-Star catcher. They were so good that they traded Brian Giles, multi-time All-Star, Richie Sexson, Sean Casey, because they didn't have room in the lineup for them. And the fact that that team did not win a championship, like the fact that it took LeBron James, and like arguably the best basketball player of all time, inarguably like a top 3 basketball player of all time, the fact that it took him coming back to win a championship, I think says all about Cleveland sports that you need to know. And in a way, it prepared me for this career, because I can't root. Like, I'm just not allowed to root, especially for these baseball teams. And for a long time, it taught me that fandom just is not worth it. And I broke my own rule over the last few years not to root, because I live in Kansas City and because my eldest son loves the Chiefs.
Yeah.
And I
We saw each
found
other at the Super Bowl.
we did.
Yeah.
Yeah, he had. I believe he had been. He had gone downstairs at the hotel we were staying at, forgotten to bring the key, and was just
Yes.
stuck at the bottom. And I had to go rescue him, because kids are dumb. Um,
I can confirm.
and so I did this math in my head at one point. I have 200 weekends left with him before he goes to college. How am I going to spend those 200 weekends? I'd like to spend them doing things that we enjoy together. And that is how I became a Kansas City Chiefs season ticket holder. Because how often does it line up that you are sharing a city with someone who's the best at what he's done, who is the best, the very best at what he does ever? And no disrespect to Tom Brady, but I think on a game for game basis, Patrick Mahomes is the most talented quarterback ever to play football. And if we have the opportunity to go and spend a few weekends a year watching him play, and we can bring a couple of his friends along, and like, why would we not do that? Why if I have the means as a father, would I not provide selfishly like those moments for myself that we can look back on? And so that is how I became a sports fan again. And it does, like, the instinct there runs in contrast with our responsibility as newsbreakers, which is I try to play it down the middle as much as I can. I did, like, people ask me like, you don't root for a baseball team? I'm like, no, I root for good people and I root for good stories. And if the two of those things happen to intersect, it brings a big smile to my face. But at the end of the day, this job is a massive balancing act, and you really can't afford for people to think that you're rooting for someone or some team or something like that, because as much as I don't like getting beaten on a story, I've kind of learned the whole, like, just there's another. Um, these teams, these athletes, these coaches, these executives, these analysts, from the very top of the organization to the lowest on the depth chart, so to speak. Um, this is everything to them. And so it's irresponsible of me to be frivolous about that and to give them a reason to think that me doing the ultimate mandate of my job, which is telling good stories and breaking news, somehow needs to be interfered with by my desire for one team to do better than the other. I've it doesn't exist, and maybe that makes me a robot, but I'm okay with
You are definitely not a robot. You are one of the best people that I follow on Twitter, and you're on the podium at the very least. You blend insight, news, and humor that makes you a must follow. But you're also the paragon of responsibility that you just described in terms of being objective, but also in terms of being accurate with your news breaking. And you mentioned a name that kind of triggered a thought that I wanted to follow up on. Carlos Baerga, who I believe you said hit second for the Indians back when they were still the Indians in a few decades ago now, I should say. I believe Carlos, and correct me if I'm wrong here, is he an occasional, I don't know if newsbreaker is the proper term, but news alerter on his Instagram page? Is that the right person I'm thinking of?
Yeah, I have a scab on my elbow that you might be picking at right now.
Okay,
Um,
all right. Okay.
I no,
So I wasn't going to ask
no,
you
no,
about
oh, no, we're
Carlos.
going here. No, we're going here because I need to talk. I need to talk this through, and I need to have, like, a reasonable human being tell me if my perspective on these sorts of things is okay, because as like I hate people who try to break news and do it in a really irresponsible way. Not because, like, they're bad people. I've actually gotten to know Carlos, and, like, at the World Baseball Classic, Carlos Baerga introduced himself to me. Can you imagine what 1995 Jeff would have said about this?
Yeah.
Like, it was
I
like
mean, bowing at the altar, right?
it's still like a very, very, like, cool thing to me. But Carlos, and this was a perfect example. What happened yesterday when our colleague Buster Only got hacked, and unlike when I got hacked, and the guy was just trying to sell NFTs.
Yeah, I bought a couple of
I know. How are they doing?
them.
We might have
They're
lost
awesome.
some. Yeah.
They're in the digital studio we have over on
I
the other
think
side
that
of the house.
I'm just picturing them like it's so field to be sitting in front of rich mahogany. Like, Like you are, this is
Yeah.
like the full Burgundy experience that
Yeah,
I
we're
see right
going for
now.
here.
And
That's what I was aiming for.
I feel like under your desk, there's a button. And when you press the button, the mahogany's not just gonna like separate like this. I feel like it's gonna fold in on itself and do something fancy to reveal all those NFTs that you bought from me. You're gonna have like a little iPhone for each one of them to show them
Yeah.
off because NFTs aren't real. And
Yeah, that's a
and
good point.
you've got them locked back there, and I'm so excited to break into your house. Um,
Yeah. You
so
you pretty much nailed that.
I did. So the hacker for Buster tweeted out that the Philadelphia Phillies have acquired Luis Robert from the Chicago White Sox, and Carlos just went with it.
Oh
Carlos just
gosh.
yeah,
So good.
Carlos just
So
went with
good.
it.
Yeah.
And what like one of the most important things that I think has gone the wrong way in our society, old man alert, is internet literacy. I
Yeah.
feel like we are
Yeah.
in many ways a very internet illiterate society, and that we have been conditioned through social media to believe what we see, and we're so quickly moving on to the next thing that we don't even bother taking the time to check the veracity of stuff. And so when somebody throws something out there, and we oh, it's out there, it's gotta be real if somebody typed it. Like, is that our standard now? Is that our threshold now? And Carlos is in like a very big aggregator. If he reads something, he's putting it out there, baby. He is going full send on it. And so what there have I'm sure there have been elements where Carlos has been told something, but there's no second sourcing there. Like if he's told something, he's going to run with it. And guess what? Sometimes people are going to get told something and it's going to be right on the first source. I don't have the luxury of that. And so is it bad for me to sit here and be jealous of slash angry at people who do? And by do I mean like, if someone who's not being like uh, who's not employed by anyone specifically to break news is just throwing stuff up against the wall, there's really not a whole lot of consequence for getting something wrong. But boy, oh boy, is there glory in getting something right. And that's what like gnaws at me. It's whenever someone throws something out there and I have to chase it, even though I know, like in my head, this is not true. My sources have told me this is not true. But did I miss something? It's ridiculous how crazy my brain works sometimes. I'm sitting and watching like Buster's hacker intently, like talking about the most ridiculous things. If I go to prison, who's going to bring me panties? Like that was said. and, and
Everything
and
about it was
everything about
unbelievable,
it was
literally.
absurd. But then I see the Luis Robert tweet, and I'm like,
Is
"Did
Buster
Buster get his
back?
account back?" Even though 30 seconds
Yeah,
earlier,
no, I
30
know.
seconds earlier, the guy was
Yeah.
tweeting about, "I hate the Mets."
I
Is there
admittedly
is
had
there
the
a chance?
same
Is there a
reaction. I
chance?
know.
And here's what I did. I like I never want to say to myself after a news story, did you do everything that you could? Sometimes you just get beat honestly. There are a lot of good baseball reporters. Like I have modeled myself, or tried to at least, after Ken Rosenthal for a long time. He has been like the paragon of doing what I do for decades now. And so the notion that I'm going to go head to head with him and with all of the other people out there who are trying to break news, who are equally intelligent and sourced and driven, and all of the things that I think you need to do this. The idea that I'm going to go up against them and win all the time is just not real. So I need, like, hard work matters, and you never want to leave anything on the table. So I'll admit I did text people from the Phillies and the White Sox, and it was more a, hey, if you're getting any questions about this, this is why. But it was also implicitly, hey, if this isn't the hacker, could you let me know?
All right. Oh my gosh, what a great answer. I really was not trying to poke the bear there because I find it, and my news breaking aptitude is a much lower level than yours. But I have had the occasional, completely out of left field tip, if you will, from somebody that was seemingly far too removed from a story for it to actually be real.
Yeah.
And like once in a blue moon, it's been real. So
Yeah.
sometimes you do find yourself going down or going through that process that you just explained of, even when I know it's not, I have to do my diligence.
I just remember, you know what I remember? It's still sore because I remember sitting in a parking lot knowing that the Rafael Devers deal was done and not having the go ahead from my sources yet to break it. Fucking Carlos.
Oh,
Just
Carlos,
swooped right in.
why'd you do it, man?
Those are the ones you remember. Like, those are the ones that it's so amazing how you remember the losses more than you remember the wins.
I talk about this often. I'm not a good golfer at all, but even if I have a reasonable day, Jeff, I come home and I bemoan all the bad shots rather than recounting the very few good shots.
Okay, so what do you shoot? Like, what's
I have played minimal golf since my second child was born a year ago.
Yeah.
So I feel good if I'm in the 90s these days, Jeff.
Okay, that's reasonable. Golf is the one sport where it's the opposite for me. I only remember the good shots. I only remember the good holes because that's all that brings me back. Golf is such a depressing game that if you don't remember the good ones, why would you ever do it again? Because there are so many bad ones.
There are a lot.
It is full of bad ones, and I can still tell you the most glorious hole of my life. It was my first round back after I got hit by the tree.
Yeah.
And
broken back, people. Yeah.
Yes. Broke my back in July of 2023. And, I discussed with my PT right when I was starting PT of two things that I want to do. Number one, I want to be able to carry a 50-pound suitcase by October because I want to be on the road for the playoffs. And even if I'm hobbling around, whatever, I don't care. But I need to be able to lift a suitcase off a conveyor belt at an airport. I don't want to travel with a valet, Actually,
reasonable ask.
It's not, though, because I feel like
I think it is.
I feel like I would call it a valet. I feel like I would be very Downton Abbey, and I would have my own valet who I walked around with. And even if he wasn't named Jeeves, I would call him that. And that seems to be the sort of thing someone named Field would do. Jeffs are not afforded.
Don't you dare typecast me.
Bro, I'm sorry. The background, you're typecasting yourself.
I really am. Hey, my wife, she found the house. And she said the perfect thing about it has an office. You don't have to set up your studio in one of our kids' bedrooms anymore. So
yep.
I really shouldn't be mad. I have no venom towards my wife for finding this home. But man, are we only perpetuating the stereotype that much more? We are doing ourselves no favors in that regard.
That's that's okay. The second thing I wanted to do, though, is I wanted to put in all the work that I could and do everything that I could to play golf at the winter meetings, because every year I play golf with a couple of the same guys, and it's become a tradition. And one thing I've understood as I got older is um, value traditions, like the things you do with people that bring you joy, make them a real responsibility in your life, and make sure to do them, because things that last are important. And I didn't want to, I didn't want to break that streak. And so I worked hard, and I wasn't sure how it was going to feel when I got out there, but I at least put myself in a position to golf that day. And we are on the final hole of our round, and I have made it. And it's like a 430-yard par four. And I hit a magnificent, like, I hit the worst drives. I don't have any loft on my drives. I've never figured out how to do it. So I either hit piss missiles or I hit just pathetic dribblers.
Yep,
This
that's
one
usually my style.
this one it didn't have a ton of loft on it, but it had magnificent carry, and it went about 275. There were three sort of hills in the distance, and it was like right in the middle hill on the fairway. And I had like a buck 60 or so to the hole. And I think I probably used, from 160, I used six probably. And I took a divot, and when I take a divot, it's it's very hit or miss. It, much like my drives, that can either be glorious or pathetic. The thing, when I take a divot, it's like, did I actually pick this one clean? And it's flying in the air, and it's going over water. And I can't believe I'm recounting a golf hole to you. I'm very sorry. This is
This
psycho
is
behavior
all I
here.
ever wanted.
And it lands, and it's 10 feet from the hole. And I'm like, you know what? I'm going to three putt this, because
Love the confidence.
no, I can't end well. I'm not a good enough golfer to end a round on a birdie on a par four. I'm just not good enough to do that. But I'll be damned, I sunk the putt. And dude, like, that is something that I will remember for the rest of my life. Every like, that will sustain me in golf for the next 5 years. Every time I go and hit a terrible shot, or do something wrong, or get angry with myself, I will remember that hole and what can be. And I will be chasing that forever, because I'm never going to be good enough at golf to regularly be birdieing par fours. Like, par three, sure. Sometimes you're going to hit a really good tee shot. Par fives, yeah. Like, if you hit a good second shot, you give yourself a chance. Par fours to me are like, especially long par fours, are the closest thing to an impossibility for success. So finding that success on that hole, it's why I love golf. And my kid plays it, and he's so bad, and it's hilarious to
I
see,
like him
because
even
I'm
more.
not I'm not better than him at a whole lot of things anymore. But I do
Yeah.
have him beaten golf, so we probably should do it more to boost my confidence.
That seems like a very reasonable strategy. My kids are far too young to have those things at which we can actually compete in. But I've talked about that with my wife. Is like, there's going to come a time in our life where our children are faster than us, or can kick a soccer ball further or faster than we can. We're not prepared for those moments, at least not yet. Here is the truth, Jeff. I could keep you for probably the rest of our day, but I'm sure baseball, there's probably a first pitch around the corner relatively soon, and you probably have more important things to do than to flap gums with me. But I do want to thank you, because that conversation went a lot of places that I can't say I was going to forecast, but I'm so glad that we ended up where we did. You're not just, as I have said many times, the best there is in the baseball industry, and really regardless of sports, but also one of the kindest and most interesting people that I work with at ESPN, and funny as well. So I owe you a big thanks, my friend, for joining us here on the Field Talk podcast.
I appreciate you having me, Field, and sometimes after I do things like this, I realize how much I talk, and I would just like to apologize for being the king of yap, as my
No.
children like to say. I feel like we can't end on a golf shot. We
Well,
gotta
we're going to ask you a baseball question. You want to talk about something else? Well, I have a football question for you, but I think I'll. How about this? Can we meet in the middle? And rather than me boring you with a baseball question, which you get asked all day, and not golf shot, I did have one football thing because while you are omnipresent in the world of baseball, you did write a book on the BCS, Jeff. And that means you know not just college football, but college politics pretty well. What do you make of where college sports are headed right now? And you could probably give me 20 minutes on this. So I don't want to make you feel responsible for emptying every single thought you have, but I would be curious if you think that what has happened over the past few years is just the beginning, or are we about to enter this complete state of mayhem in college sports that may prove unsolvable?
college sports has always been such a paradox for me because it's been this very thin sheen of amateurism that has somehow held up like the most powerful fabric in the world. It has been the 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 commodification of athletes without the compensation, and somehow the fact that it has maintained itself as long as it have, it's really like a modern business miracle, the way that the free labor has lasted for a century. And there are still people out there who want to say that college scholarship is paying, and I'm not going to discount the idea that a free ride to college is an insignificant thing. It's a very significant thing, and it's a wonderful thing. And I personally am glad that sports and college intertwine themselves, because I think there's no greater thing in life to teach you lessons than sports, to teach you responsibility, to teach you diligence, to teach you teamwork, to teach you all these elements that manifest themselves in everyday life as an adult. But I also think it's utterly ridiculous that this had turned into a $1 billion industry and the labor wasn't being compensated for it. So it was, to me, it was inevitable that when the dam broke on this, it was going to get really messy, because what Death to the BCS showed me is that college athletics is run by a bunch of idiots, and there was no planning done. And everyone, they are like kids at a birthday party with a pinata. They're going to dive into the middle and grab every last piece of candy that they can without any regard for anyone else, no matter how stupid it makes them look, no matter how awful it is for the kids. When you have teams in California and teams in on the East Coast in the very same conference, that tells you this was professional sports all along, with a side of history and psychology and economics and whatever major you choose. From the beginning with football and with basketball, it has always been about the football and basketball. And it's why I'm so amazed that amateurism held up for as long as it did, because it was always such a false conceit. And I hope, it's interesting to me to see the people who are coming into this space. There's one in baseball named Harry Marino, and Harry organized the minor leaguers, right? The minor league players in baseball for the longest time did not have a union. And Harry got them together and worked with the Major League Baseball Players Association. And now you have 6,000 players who previously did not have any sort of not just representation, but any ability to say to their employers, these working conditions are not okay. Well, he's going into the college space, as are others right now, and it's going to take a decade. Like, it's going to take a long time, I think, for college athletics to figure itself out and to find that Goldilocks place where it gets as close as it can to being normal. I just hate that the adults at the table let it get to the point where they were making decisions based on what's happening right now, as opposed to what should be happening a year or 5 from now. They were playing musical chairs, and they were willing to literally knife their partners in order to get one of those chairs. And if that's what the sport has turned into, if that's what the entire NCAA has turned into, maybe it's time for the presidents and for the athletic directors to take a step back, look at the landscape of things, and say, before we go grabbing the money, maybe we should figure out what's best for everyone involved, the kids included.
That was an incredibly insightful and sophisticated answer, Jeff, and you're one of the most well-equipped people to answer it. I can't wait to see sort of the layman's perspective on this all when it's week 7 and the broadcaster opens up the broadcast as follows. Welcome into this Atlantic Coast Conference matchup featuring Boston College and Cal. 2 teams literally 3,000 miles apart. And last I checked, Cal is as close to the Atlantic coast as I don't even know what, but that is it's quite a different world that we are in and perhaps headed for in college sports, primarily driven by college football and, of course, college basketball. All right, Jeff Passan, I can say all the nice things that I said about you earlier, but I think more than anything, I'll just let people listen to that part because those comments stand. I really appreciate you joining us here, and we covered baseball, we covered reporting, we covered golf, we covered college sports. That right there is what we call checking all the boxes, my friend.
This was fun, and thanks for having me, buddy. Appreciate it.
There are times in which you think something's going to go a certain way, and then there are times in which it goes a different direction, and it ends up being a pleasant surprise, as was the case with our wide-ranging conversation with the great Jeff Passan, one of my favorite people to talk about kind of everything at ESPN. We also want to thank all of you for checking out the Field Talk podcast presented by Roback. Go to roback.com to check out all your apparel needs. You probably see me wearing one of these hoodies every day because I kind of do. And a reminder that you can subscribe to the Field Talk podcast wherever you get your podcast. If you'd be so kind, we would love a review. It doesn't have to be positive, but we certainly like that feedback. But we want your honesty. It certainly helps us go a long way as we continue through the Field Talk podcast. Until the next time, we'll talk to you all soon.